when guards fall. The steel door slammed shut behind Officer Maya Chen, and she felt it reverberate through her chest like it did every morning. 5 years she'd worked at Riverbend Women's Correctional Facility, and the sound still made her heart clench. She walked past cell after cell, her boots echoing against concrete floors that had witnessed more tears than most churches, more confessions than most therapists' offices. Maya had built walls around herself just as impenetrable as the ones surrounding this prison. She told herself it was necessary, that caring too much would destroy her in a place like this. But on a rain-soaked Tuesday in October, those walls would begin to crack because of a woman with ink-stained fingers and eyes that held galaxies of unspoken words. Inmate 4782, known to the world as Sarah Martinez, sat in the prison library every afternoon at 3 o'clock. She wasn't like the others who shuffled through their sentences. With dead eyes and mechanical movements, Sarah wrote. She wrote on everything she could find. Scraps of paper, the margins of donated books, even on her own skin when nothing else was available. Maya first noticed her during a routine inspection, finding poems tucked between mattress and frame. Words so beautiful they made Maya's breath catch. The poems spoke of loss and longing, of a mother's love and a daughter left behind, of mistakes that couldn't be undone and a future that seemed impossibly far away. Maya knew she should have reported the contraband writings, but instead, she carefully placed them back exactly where she'd found them, and that small act of mercy was the first stone, removed from her carefully constructed wall. Their first real conversation happened by accident. Maya was shelving returned books in the library when Sarah's voice, soft and hesitant, broke the silence. She asked if Maya had ever read a particular poet, someone obscure that Maya's literature professor mother had introduced her to as a child. The coincidence felt like fate intervening, and Maya found herself sitting down, forgetting protocol, forgetting the uniform that separated them. They talked about metaphors and meaning, about how words could build bridges between people who had nothing else in common. Sarah's eyes lit up when she spoke about poetry, and Maya realized she hadn't seen that kind of light in anyone's eyes for years. Maybe not since she'd looked in the mirror before this job had hardened her. When Maya stood to leave, she felt something shift inside her chest, something warm and terrifying that she immediately tried to suppress. The conversations became routine, carefully disguised as officer oversight. Maya would patrol the library during Sarah's scheduled time, and they would exchange words between the shelves, their voices low and careful. Sarah told her story in fragments, piece by painful piece. She'd been a teacher once, had a daughter named, Emma, who was 7 when Sarah made the worst decision of her life. A car accident while driving under the influence, a teenager who didn't survive, a sentence of 8 years that felt like 8 lifetimes. Sarah's ex-husband had taken Emma, moved across the country, and the letters Sarah wrote every week came back unopened. The guilt was eating her alive from the inside. But still she wrote her poems. Still she searched for beauty in a place designed to strip it away. Maya found herself lying awake at night thinking about Sarah's words, about the injustice of a woman so full of love being locked away from everyone she wanted to love. Maya had never labeled herself, never really examined the way her heart worked. She'd dated men because it was expected, had even been engaged once to someone safe and boring who she'd left at the altar because something essential was missing. Now watching Sarah's hands move as she described a metaphor, noticing the way Sarah's face transformed when she smiled, Maya understood what had been missing her entire life. The realization hit her like a physical blow one evening as she drove home, and she had to pull over to the side of the road, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. She was falling in love with an inmate. She was falling in love with a woman. Both truths were equally impossible, equally undeniable, and Maya sat in her car in the gathering darkness and let herself cry for the first time in years. Sarah knew before Maya did. Women who've lost everything become experts at reading the small signs, the tiny shifts in energy that most people miss. She noticed the way Maya's voice softened when they talked, the way Maya's fingers trembled slightly when their hands accidentally brushed while passing a book. Sarah tried to protect them both by pulling away, by skipping her library time, by building her own walls. But the heart doesn't respect walls, doesn't care about rules or consequences or the impossibility of a situation. After 2 weeks of silence, Maya found a poem slipped under the library desk's drawer, written on a scrap of newspaper. It was about two souls meeting in the wrong place at the wrong time, about light finding light even in darkness, and it ended with the words, "I see you seeing me." Maya pressed that paper to her chest and knew that whatever came next, she couldn't walk away. The risk they were taking could destroy them both. Maya could lose her job, face criminal charges for fraternization with an inmate. Sarah could lose any chance at early parole, could be transferred to a facility hours away. But love, especially love that blooms in impossible places, has its own logic that defies reason. They stole moments that felt like stolen treasure, a hand squeeze that lasted 2 seconds too long during a library visit. Notes hidden in book spines, Maya's responses tucked back in the same places. Conversations that lasted deep into Maya's shift, long after other officers had gone home, words flowing between them like water finding its level. They talked about everything and nothing, about childhood dreams and adult regrets, about the people they'd been and the people they were becoming. Maya brought Sarah news of the outside world, and Sarah gave Maya poetry that made sense of the chaos inside her heart. The other inmates noticed, of course. In prison, observation is survival and nothing escapes notice. But something unexpected happened. Instead of reporting them or using the information as leverage, the women in Sarah's cell block began protecting them. They created diversions during head counts, covered for library visits that ran too long, passed messages when direct communication was too dangerous. These were women who society had labeled as criminals, as dangerous, as unworthy of compassion, and yet they recognized love when they saw it and chose to shelter it. An older inmate named Gloria, serving life for killing her abusive husband, told Maya one day that love was the only thing worth protecting in a place designed to destroy it. That if Maya was smart, she'd fight for what she'd found, because most people went their whole lives without feeling it even once. Maya started fighting in ways both small and significant. She advocated for Sarah's poetry to be published in the prison newsletter. She helped Sarah draft letters to her daughter, even though they still came back unopened, even though each rejection broke Sarah a little more. She researched early release programs and parole procedures, staying up until 3 a.m. to understand every possible path forward. She testified at Sarah's parole hearing, keeping her voice professional even as her heart hammered against her ribs, describing Sarah's rehabilitation and growth in terms that were absolutely true and yet couldn't capture the full truth of who Sarah had become. The parole board denied the request. Sarah had served only 4 of her 8 years, and they wanted to see more time, more evidence of change. Maya held Sarah's gaze across the hearing room as they led her back to her cell, and in that look, they promised each other that this wasn't the end. But the scrutiny increased after the hearing. A new warden arrived, someone who ran the facility by the book, who believed that any kindness was a weakness waiting to be exploited. Maya's visits to the library were questioned, her interactions with inmates monitored more closely. She knew she should stop, knew that continuing put everything at risk. But the thought of abandoning Sarah felt like tearing out her own heart. They became more careful, more creative. Messages hidden in poetry books that only they knew to check. Brief exchanges during meal service when Maya was assigned to the cafeteria. Glances across crowded rooms that said everything words couldn't. The love between them deepened. Not in spite of the obstacles, but because of them. Because choosing each other every day despite the impossibility made every moment sacred. The breaking point came on a cold February morning when Sarah received a letter that wasn't returned, that had actually been opened and read. Emma, now 13, had written back. The letter was short, angry, full of pain and questions that Sarah didn't know how to answer. But it was contact. It was a door opened just a crack. Sarah wept in the library, and Maya broke every rule she'd ever followed by pulling Sarah into her arms, by holding her while she shook with sobs, by whispering that everything would be okay, even though she didn't know if that was true. Another officer walked in and saw them. Time seemed to stop. Maya waited for the alarm, for the consequences, for everything to come crashing down. But Officer Jenkins, a 20-year veteran with tired eyes and a daughter Sarah's age, simply nodded once and walked back out, closing the door behind her. She never mentioned what she'd seen, and Maya understood that she'd just been given a gift beyond measure. If this story is touching something in your heart, if you believe in love that defies boundaries and people who choose compassion over judgment, Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories about the resilience of the human heart, about love in all its forms, and about the courage it takes to be truly seen. Maya made a decision that night that would change everything. She couldn't keep living in this limbo, couldn't keep loving Sarah in shadows and stolen moments. She requested a transfer to an administrative position in the prison system, a desk job that would take her out of daily contact with inmates but keep her close enough to still help Sarah navigate the system. The sacrifice hurt, knowing she wouldn't see Sarah's face every day, wouldn't have those conversations that made time stop. But it was also an act of profound love, choosing Sarah's future over her own immediate happiness, positioning herself to be a genuine advocate without the ethical violations that could destroy them both. When she told Sarah, she did it through a letter hidden in a poetry collection, explaining that sometimes love means stepping back to give someone room to fly. The 18 months that followed were the hardest of Maya's life. She watched Sarah from a distance, tracking her progress through reports and official channels. She saw Sarah complete her GED, then start college courses through a prison education program. She saw the relationship with Emma slowly rebuild through supervised phone calls and eventually, hesitantly, visits. She saw Sarah become a mentor to younger inmates, teaching them to read and write, to find words for feelings they'd never known how to express. And though they couldn't speak, couldn't touch, couldn't acknowledge what existed between them, Maya felt Sarah's presence in everything. Every poem published in the prison newsletter felt like a love letter written in code. Every small victory felt like a gift they were giving each other across the distance that separated them. Sarah's second parole hearing approached. 6 years served, a model prisoner by every measure, a mother working desperately to reunite with her daughter, a woman transformed by her time inside these walls. Maya prepared a written statement, carefully worded to be professional and yet achingly honest about Sarah's growth. She didn't attend the hearing this time because her presence might raise questions, might harm more than help. But she waited by her phone like a teenager waiting for a first date to call. When the notification came through the official system, Maya had to read it 3 times before she believed it. Parole granted. Release date in 30 days. Sarah was coming home. They didn't communicate during those 30 days. It was too risky, too close to the finish line to stumble now. Maya didn't know if Sarah would want to see her once she was free. Didn't know if the love that had grown in prison could survive in the real world. She'd resigned from the prison system entirely, unable to work in a place that held so many memories, unwilling to compromise Sarah's fresh start with any appearance of impropriety. She'd returned to school, was getting her teaching credential, planning a future that felt both terrifying and full of possibility. On Sarah's release day, Maya didn't go to the prison. She went instead to a small coffee shop 3 blocks from the halfway house where Sarah would be staying, the one she'd mentioned in a letter years ago, as her favorite place before everything fell apart. If you're still with us, if this story has made you think about the nature of love, about second chances, about the courage it takes to be yourself in a world that doesn't always understand, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below telling us what you think about Sarah and Maya's journey. Your words matter to us. Maya sat by the window for 3 hours, drinking coffee that had gone cold, watching every person who walked past. She was about to give up, about to accept that maybe prison love couldn't translate to real life. When the door opened and Sarah walked in, she looked different in civilian clothes, her hair longer, her face somehow both harder and softer than Maya remembered. Their eyes met across the room, and Maya felt her heart stop and restart, felt every wall she'd rebuilt in the last 18 months crumble to dust. Sarah walked to her table, didn't say anything, just held out her hand. Maya took it, feeling Sarah's pulse under her thumb, feeling the shock of skin on skin without barriers or fear. They sat like that for a long moment, just breathing, just being. 2 women who'd found each other in the darkest place and refused to let go even when everything said they should. Sarah finally spoke, her voice rough with emotion, saying the words that Maya had dreamed about for years. I'm free, and I choose you, if you'll still have me. Maya didn't answer with words. She stood, pulled Sarah close, and kissed her in the middle of that coffee shop with the afternoon light streaming through the windows. Kissed her like they had all the time in the world because finally, impossibly, they did. Around them, strangers who didn't know their story smiled, at what looked like a simple moment of affection, but was actually a revolution, a reclaiming, a love that had survived everything designed to destroy it. And in that kiss, Maya tasted freedom, tasted forgiveness, tasted the future they would build together, one brave choice at a time. Two women who had found each other in captivity and would spend the rest of their lives learning what it meant to love without walls.